Okay, so shall we begin? So welcome everybody. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're here to discuss the future challenges of IoT together with Hub Security's very own Senior Product Manager, Tal Shemesh. We're joined alongside a number of IoT and security experts, including Yamanoor, Linde Yusupova, Queirós, and Saverio, Romeo. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I'm super excited and looking forward to our discussion. We're going to start our webinar with a brief introduction from Tal Shemesh on the security challenges related to the Internet of Things, and then our panelists will each get a chance to introduce themselves. Afterwards, we'll get into a deeper discussion on everything related to IoT challenges, threats, and the solutions that exist to address them. As usual, we'll leave about 30 minutes at the end of our discussion for a short Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section below, and we'll get to them later on. Now, we have an impressive lineup of panelists tonight, and I'm excited to have them introduce themselves to you. But first, we'll begin with a few words from Tal before we hand off the mic for introductions. Take it away, Tal.
Thanks, Shterny. Hi, everyone. Tal Shemesh, Hub Security, Product Management here in the company a few months now. And as an intro to today's discussion about IoT, Internet of Things, it's a concept that we have kind of a decade since it started emerging. And now it becomes an integral part of our life. We all recently heard of Meta, former Facebook company, of their goal to build a metaverse where we will connect the physical and digital world. And we all hear about surgeons surging and on a patient using virtual reality glasses. So the technology is here, and we are building and living in a future connected environment, and with it, it brings with it concerns and challenges. And in today's discussion, we will cover the basics of what is IoT technology in terms of market and use cases, and what challenges and threats, security-wise, as well as deployment-wise, we are already facing with the IoT into our complex global network of technologies. And we will also present existing and future approaches how to mitigate these challenges and threats.
Thank you, Tal. And I'm excited to have you. Can you guys hear me? I don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tal, and we're excited to have you here. And yeah, this is our first webinar together. So
yeah, that's true.
Okay, let's take a few minutes to do some introductions, starting with Sai. Would you mind giving our listeners a bit of background on yourself and your field of expertise? What perspective you're bringing today?
Sure. My name is Sai Yamanoor. I'm a senior research engineer at Linde. I'm based in Buffalo, New York. So I'm part of what's called the IoT and digital applications group, and our focus is to actually develop low-cost IoT devices for Linde's customers. In case you're not familiar, Linde makes industrial gases, and we are not in the business of making connected devices. So our goal is to sell more gas. So our devices need to be really, really low cost. So our group focuses on identifying challenges for our customers and see how we could help them. This could, be a range from something like remote monitoring to building, building something quite customized for our customers. And I've been with Linde for about 4 years now. And I've seen varying kinds of projects, and it's it keeps me I keep getting challenged on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we're super excited to have you here with us today. So thank you for joining. Next, Livy.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Lily Yusupova. I'm with Schneider Electric. We're a global company that focuses on software and infrastructure for technical solutions. And I'm an account executive here. And really my role is to work with companies that need technical solutions. And my job is to collaborate with them and give them a consultative approach to their challenges. So this is a really exciting topic because as devices keep growing, as technology keeps growing, we all need to get together and kind of see the challenges and how do we solve it and solutions out there that can support it. So thank you for having me.
Definitely. Thank you, Lily. Thanks for being here. Saverio, Romeo, you're up next.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Saverio Romeo. I come from a telecom background. I looked at how machines talk to each other 25 years and more ago. You can see my white hair. And I stayed there until now. The only thing that is in the last 6-7 years, I have kind of two phases. On one side, I still look at the IoT from let's say more consultancy or in-field application side. On the other side, I collaborate with University of London. We have a Center for Innovation Management Research at Birkbeck, where we actually look at how companies and public sector adopt emerging digital technologies, including IoT. So what that means, challenges for society, for economy, for companies, benefits. So, I'll bring a bit of this angle. A bit more academic angle if you want to, a bit more critical if you want. Thank you.
No problem. And again, we're very happy that you could join us. Thank you. Carlos, you're last.
Yes, thank you, Shterny, and thank you guys for having me. So my name is Carlos Queirós. I'm based in Porto, Portugal. So I'm an electrical engineer. All my career, I have been managing and delivering IoT and software projects quite around the world. Currently, I'm head of platform partnerships at Infraspeak. Infraspeak is the first intelligent maintenance management platform in the market. And my role is pretty much around adding value to an existing platform with IoT softwares and other tools that can build an intelligent operation. So I'm like an IoT buyer that builds a solution for our clients in order to have a better operations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. And thanks for being here as well. So before we dive into today's discussion, just a little overview. We've divided today's event into 3 topics. We're going to start with our first topic, which is just an introduction, a bit of background and introduction to IoT technology, including the market and some use cases. We have people here with some knowledge, and we have people here with a lot of knowledge. So we're going to start from the top and work our way down. Second topic, we're going to talk about challenges and threats that exist. And in the third, we will address approaches and solutions. So let's start off with Sai. Why don't you start us off? What is IoT and how is it shaping the future?
I can tell you from the perspective of remote monitoring at my job, the Internet of Things enables you to build a system. Back in the day, if you have a tank of liquid carbon dioxide, all you could do was have a gauge, a floating level gauge that gave you the amount of gas that's left for a particular fast food restaurant, and the way they used to refill products for such customers was on a regular basis. Like they would know on what frequency the customer needs the product to be refilled. and they just send the truck on a routine basis, and and they also try to hedge their tank levels by sending it in advance of a weekend or a long holiday weekend. And that's where IoT comes in, where you can now add a remote telemetry unit that reports the data to the cloud. This could be either using a wireless sensor node, or or directly pop a cellular module on top of the tank that basically constantly reports its levels once an hour on a regular basis, or maybe just twice a day. And this enables you to actually plan your allocation better. It also helps, at the same, not only are you benefiting from the data that's collected from your customer end, where it actually helps you, allocate resources, but at the same time, it is also helping the customer. Let's say that we actually detect a leak in the system, because it's possible to tell when are you refilling the product, when have you last replenished it, based upon their usage patterns and things like that. IoT enables you to actually detect leaks in the system. You can also provide a value to your customer, where you can actually share a visual dashboard of what's going on at all of their locations. And I think that's where it's exciting what you can do today, but just by adding something to a simple sensor that that keeps reporting data.
Definitely, and potential is unmeasurable. Carlos, as head of platform partnerships at Infraspeak, how are your customers now using IoT?
Yeah, so basically, as I said, so we on top of our intelligent platform, we build the solutions our clients need, right, to have intelligent and efficient operations. And in order to make this possible, we need data, and we see IoT as one of the most valuable data sources in the market. Okay, so what we search for in IoT is to enable us that we keep gathering data and keep feeding the algorithms that make the operations more intelligent and more efficient. And to give you some examples, in this, we are all in this return to office module, especially in hybrid work. And in this module, the facilities, let's imagine an office building, is not anymore some place that every day 1,000 people go to work. It's there for us to use, and then from time to time we have to give small attention to it. No, facilities, they are living operations where the occupancy, the comfort, and the security of everyone can change from one moment to another, because one time you can have 20 people in a building, and another day you can have 1,000. So pragmatic examples of how we are using IoT to help our customers in this struggle is, for example, for offices and hotels, we track the occupancy, the footfall, or the air quality, and we trigger automatically cleaning, maintenance, or support tasks based on what is happening in real time. In hospitals, we can track assets, critical assets, to make sure that they are secure, they are in the place and the time where they are needed, when they are needed by the medical teams. Or, for example, for someone that is providing service to the facilities, we are able to monitor the assets 24/7 and to predict when something is required, and not only to be always reactive to an operation. So again, for us, it's a very important data source, so we can keep making intelligent decisions.
Well, what are some of the benefits that you would say that IoT brings for businesses? I mean, of course, Carlos now and Sai mentioned a few. Maybe you could expand a bit upon this.
Yeah, in continuous to what they say, we see that for businesses, the IoT is a true innovation, meaning that we have tiny devices with the powerful algorithms behind them that they completely transform modern industries, reducing expenses and increasing working efficiency, and reducing and eliminating risks. There is a forecast that the worldwide is going to spend by 2022 $1 trillion in IoT for businesses. And of course, the benefits of implementing IoT are per each, let's call it vertical, industry vertical. Businesses report 94% of businesses that use IoT, they report on a return of investment of almost a year that they already returned their investment. So it's something that they enjoy and see revenue also and reduce cost. So let's take manufacturing plants. They're going to be enjoying increasing productivity and minimizing unexpected expenses and reducing the staff and the human labor. And if we take fleet management, that they improve their delivery tracking and mileage and fuel expenses, and agriculture evolution with the smart greenhouses that we see, and crop monitoring, and medical industry also. We have remote health monitoring and health data analysis. Even retail businesses, they can enjoy better marketing and business development and improved customer service, and even a stronger image of the company. It's really helping in many areas, and we see it growing every day.
Thank you, Tal. Definitely, IoT is a fundamental building block in digital transformation, which we're seeing. And the next level of sophistication comes when IoT converges with other technologies. Saverio, maybe you can tell us what are some of the main technologies under the radar of IoT suppliers?
Okay, so I think also building on the discussion coming from Sas, Carlos, and Tal, traditionally what we have done, we have really monitor assets, remotely monitor assets, so observing them, observing their behavior, ideally being able to locate problems in these assets. And what we want to do, the next step we want to do, we want actually to be able to predict the behavior of these assets, not just monitoring them real time or even not real time, but predicting and maybe also acting in an automated way on these assets. Now, the IoT does not do these things. The IoT is that layer that sends the space. With the sensor, gather the data, and with the connectivity layer, send the data to a cloud potentially, where the intelligence is happening. And intelligence requires analytic systems. Now, in order to do prediction, prediction of behavior of events, you need to converge artificial intelligence or branches of the artificial intelligence science with the IoT. And today what is happening is primarily around the use of machine learning, around using the data that the IoT layer gathers. And the other element that is everyone is talking, we are debating a lot, is where this intelligence needs to happen. Where do you take the decision? You take the decision only in the cloud, or you have situations in which you need to take the decision real time at the edge where the devices are. And therefore, there is the discussion about the edge computing. Another way of discussing the story, Sai talked about the gas systems, for example. Now we want to have the map of the pipelines. How do we have this map of pipelines? We can think about digital twins of the pipeline system. And this is another type of tech that works with the IoT. The other area that's which is not really something new for the IoT, but is about reinforcing the connectivity capability that there is behind the IoT in order to gather this data and send this data, is the 5G. Now, there is a lot of, I'm sure you know better than me, that there is a lot going on around the use of 5G for the IoT, which is the purposes of it, which are the dangers, where do you do it? I saw in the chat a person from Telecom, and I don't remember the name, sorry, was mentioning about mobile edge computing, which is coming with 5G. The idea of private networks, for example, an organization that has its own 5G network for doing IoT and other things, its own environment. There are a lot of IoT healthcare scholars I read on the chat. What does mean for healthcare environment? And the healthcare environment are particularly complicated. And not much from a technological point of view, and here I'm starting to be a little bit more critical, because we talk about a lot of tech, but the real problems are not really tech. The real problem is more about the management of data, the ability, the skills that you have in the organization, the exchange of that data. For example, in healthcare environment, you need to exchange data among hospitals, GPs, particularly if the system is a state-owned system. There is a lot of complication that maybe are not that tech. So these are some of technology that we are talking about. There is a lot of, for example, the idea of embedded SIM is interesting, and also from a security point of view is another point of discussion. And I think I think I said the main stuff. One message I want to say that we need to be the frame of mind in IoT should be multidisciplinary, in a sense that we will talk and we will work with a lot of expertise, very diverse, and not necessarily digital tech. You know, when you do IoT in healthcare, the partnership, the ecosystem will involve healthcare specialists, healthcare tech specialists that are not necessarily linked to the IoT, but today they are coming together with the IoT to drive the digital transformation of the healthcare system of the hospital and so on.
Definitely. So from what we understand already, it takes a village, right, to build this IoT infrastructure. Lily, is more investment needed then?
Absolutely. Everything we've talked about thus far, whether it's the trillion and more investment, the healthcare, the being able to share all this data, we can't do that without a robust backbone. So we need more, more infrastructure in fiber. We need more infrastructure and supporting the capabilities of IoT out there. You can't get the data if you don't have the proper connectivity, if you don't have the proper backup. If you think of the last, year and a half, what we've had to handle, we've understood that now connectivity is not just a want, it's a need, whether it's a hospital system needing that data or a child needing to be connected at home to do their schoolwork. So it is absolutely needs a lot more infrastructure support. And some countries have done a much better job than others. I think in North America, we need a little bit more help, even though we're Western and we're very much progressed in the types of solutions we have here. We're really missing here is that connectivity piece that Saverio also mentioned on. And something that's really needed, and hopefully, we'll get more funding with the infrastructure bill coming up here to support that. Europe's done a decent job of connectivity. Even some parts of Asia have done a really good job, but there's more need to be done. If everything we're talking about, all the connected products, solutions, they're going to need more fiber. They're going to need more backup. They're going to need more ways to communicate with each other, get that data. And software management, we don't really talk a lot about that, but managing the software of IoT is also that key piece. So I absolutely think that there's going to be a lot more investment needed if we're going to be that looking far ahead. We also need to think about the resiliency and also backing up that data. That's why you have data centers out there, and now you have a lot of edge sites out there who focus on that. And if we start talking about even driverless cars, right, a lot more infrastructure, a lot more backbone is going to need to be supported in all those aspects.
Thanks, Lily. Moving on to our second topic, which addresses challenges and threats. Carlos, other than investment or lack of investment within infrastructure, what are some of the other obstacles that prevent IoT-based operations from becoming a more common reality and becoming more ubiquitous?
I think I just want to connect a bit with what Lily just said, because the points that I wanted to point out are a bit related with the lack of investment. But I would say that the lack of investment is maybe connected with the lack of vision, okay? Because the facilities and the infrastructure itself was not built thinking to be prepared for this age, right? Where everything is connected. And as a person that is always looking into, especially facilities, to try to build solutions, most of the time the challenge is the connectivity, but the connectivity because the whole facility, even if it was done 6 months ago, was not thought in a way that the devices could connect, that they have enough bandwidth, that they have enough sensors, that so even if it's very recent and the IoT and the Internet of Things is a topic that is being talked long years now, when you are in the field, you see that it's only on the academic level, on the state investment level, and on private investment level. That's a topic that is never the priority. So this is not, let's build something that allows us to lately adopt an IoT-based operation. I think that will be my highlight as the biggest blocker I see when I work in this sector.
Where do you see that investment coming from? Is it private or public? Where do you see the onus and responsibility falling?
I think it has to be both, right? So as usually as the big investments, for example, the one that Saverio talking probably has more knowledge on that than me. But for example, 5G, if the governments don't do a push, I don't think that the private sector itself will do all the investment by alone, right? So I think it has to be a mix between both. The public sector has to give a push because the economies will be much more efficient, much more. It will create the thing with IoT and 5G and the technology that Saverio talked about is that it's obviously more efficiency, more speed, and etc. But it will create use cases that don't exist today, and I think that's the topic that has to be the public sector to realize that, okay, in order for this to be possible and the economies to innovate, we need to do a first step. But those are my 5 cents.
Thank you, Carlos. Saverio, developing an IoT solution is, as we hear, often not very simple, and it requires a lot of decision-making. As an IoT research associate at STL, what are some of the main challenges you're facing day to day?
First of all, I want to just jump on what Carlos said, and then I go to you. I think in the IoT, we should distinguish kind of waves of development. Yeah, there is a sort of first wave of companies who have invested and have done very interesting things on the IoT. And we should not underestimate that phase. The problem of the IoT is that level of sophistication that certain companies are demonstrated is not spread. Therefore, for example, it's problematic for SMEs to think about IoT in a certain way. It's problematic for a variety of reasons that are, in my opinion, not really technological, but the typical reason of the problems of an SME, of time, skills, management, and investment. On your question, so if you take the case of the hospital, yeah, and we want to do an IoT deployment into an hospital, what do? We need to deploy and plan the sensors, and these sensors are very diverse because these sensors need to do different things. Yeah, so we have a population of sensors that gather different type of data. And we want this data all together because we want to have the agnostic view of the hospital. Then we gather them, we send this data to an IoT platform. And in the IoT platform does a number of things. Without going details, at least does the device management, does a bit of data storage, a bit of data management. And then we want maybe use this data to do stuff. We want to enable developers to do applications. For doing this, we want to ensure the security of all these at any level. Yeah, we don't want to have holes at any level of this stack. To do this, that means integrating different tech. And integration itself is not an easy piece of work. It's something that needs to come together among different expertise, and therefore the management of this different expertise is very important. The second point, I would say the second challenge is that the IoT solution deployment does not happen like that. It goes face to face, and there is a lot of phases in which you need to test. And the testing phase in an IoT deployment is extremely important because only in that way you can find problems. Actually, the sensor is sensing what I want the sense. Where are these data? Which is the format of the data? What do I do with this data? In a testing phase done in a proper way, I can understand that. Yeah, and then when I design the solution, I think there should be a security frame of mind. Today was published by the IoT Security Foundation here in the UK, a report on consumer IoT data, in which basically, I don't remember exactly the percentage of companies not really doing security on their device, quite very high, and which is extremely dangerous for a variety of reasons. So I think the challenge is into planning the design and the development of an IoT solution in a proper way, without the rush of being plug and play. Please, the plug and play is difficult to get to the plug and play. Let's be honest. If we do a deployment of millions of devices, the plug and play is difficult, in my opinion. I mean, my experience is almost impossible. So there are a lot of challenges that can be faced, in my opinion, in a very successful way if there is a proper multidisciplinary team working on a development step-by-step framework with particular attention on the testing POC phase of it.
I feel like that was a mic drop. Did anyone else feel a mic drop?
I heard it.
Yeah. Sai, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the more immediate challenges that are associated? I mean, we just talked about a few, including security. Are there any that you guys are facing? Not you guys specifically, but you guys have experienced when it comes to IoT deployment when working with clients?
The immediate cliff that we have to get through is the the supply chain crisis. Your customer wants the device, you want to build it, you have the resources to build it. What's happening right now, like even this morning, I was putting out a small fire with a component shortage. It has become like this, this circle. You keep going in circles trying to actually find one component or the other. We are in a place where we have lead times of 46 weeks and upwards of that. So where do you draw the line, right? It basically comes down to, okay, do we find drop-in replacements? Is there and in some cases when the lead times for components are upwards of a year, you immediately start to think, okay, should we redesign this product? And it's not it's not easy to answer those questions because you have invested a certain amount of time and you have actually optimized the product around a particular component. And in some cases, you might be dealing with applications where for example, it's probably being used in a healthcare application, or it's probably being used in a classified environment where you cannot get away with substituting components and products. So you kind of have to keep going in circles. Like what I would say, one of the immediate challenges is actually dealing with the supply chain crisis. And the other thing that comes to my mind is actually, I don't know who was talking about it. It's important to actually, talk to people who are actually using the product, because these days with the availability of IoT technology out there, you can actually solve 96% of the problem that you're trying to solve with your product. And it's usually the last 4% that creates all sorts of problems. So it's important to find out how people are going to use it. How is it going to be, can you get away with making certain trade-offs? And, it's important to have those conversations, because what I have noticed is that we keep going in circles at the very last moment. And, iterative product development is good, but it's also important to actually understand the customer's use case better. And, you don't need to over optimize, but at the same time, it's important to have that conversation.
I see Saverio nodding his head, right?
I just want to add, absolutely, I'm saying 100%. I'd like to add that in this conversation with the customer, the conversation should be a sort of on and on. The IoT solution has a life cycle that is not going to die. You want to update it. You want to update it for a variety of reasons. Could be a security updates, but could also be because you want to add more devices. And these life cycles require the involvement of the customer. And this involvement of the customer require a form of support. Many times you have a situation in which the customer doesn't know who to call, where the solution does not work. Who I call? The operators are giving connectivity, I call Sai, I call Carlos, I don't know who. So in this conversation, the support of IoT in the life cycle is very important for the provider of IoT solution. Thank you.
Thanks, Saverio. And Lily, over to you. I wanted to ask, what are some critical ways that new IoT technologies are creating threats to infrastructure? We discussed a few already. Maybe you can give us your perspective as well.
Yeah, so, Sai brought up a good point on supply chain, right, and the challenge of supply chain today. And I think I want to share that is really showing the need for IoT, because there is a demand right now that we just can't keep, right? So even as a manufacturer, there's a demand out there that we're trying to get out to our customers that we're balancing. So I think that need is important to recognize. And the challenge is really stems from being able to support those IoT needs, capabilities, and they're going to be very different, right? It's going to be different for healthcare versus telecom, but focusing on those different capabilities that they're looking to fulfill. And I think we also need to understand that with infrastructure, we also are trying to be sustainable about it. So that brings an extra core to this conversation that we don't think of. But as more devices are growing, as more IoT is growing, as companies, we also need to figure out how to be more sustainable about it. And that's really a big infrastructure challenge. So a good example is, right, so in an area like, and I'm going to pick on California, but where there's not consistent power, right? So we need to be able to find better ways to support backing up that IoT capability. And we're trying to do a better job of it instead of using, fuel for generators or the grid. We're coming out with solutions like microgrids and coming out with BESS systems that are lithium ion based that are reducing emissions. So I think the challenge is two-part. One is supporting the capability that the IoT specific vertical is trying to support, but also we also need to be very conscious of how we support that infrastructure for them as new products come out, making sure that we're focusing on that sustainability aspect as well.
Yeah, definitely. Turning back to security for a second, Tal, what are some of the security concerns that maybe we haven't heard of yet that are surrounding IoT, and what are some of the most vulnerable attack surfaces that exist for these devices?
So Saverio mentioned it a bit, and I can dive in some of the examples. We are taking something that it looks simple, that we take a device and connect it to a network, but it brings with it a lot of complexity. We have incorrect access control. We have a device that should be accessible only to its owner or people in the immediate environment that the device should trust, connected to a local network. But now it's connected to the internet. So typically or theoretically, everyone can access it. This is one aspect. We have issue that we call trusted execution environment, or lack of. These IoT devices are a general purpose computers in many cases, that they have that they can run a specific software. So now attacker can attack it, access it, and run any software that he sees fits to attack the network or to access the data, running a DDoS attack through the device. So the lack of trusted execution environment is really issue here. Insufficient physical security. These IoT devices are real devices spread all over the world. You can physically access a camera and take control of its memory and take and copy the contents of the memory. So physically securing the devices is an issue as well. Privacy protection. All these devices hold and may hold and store sensitive information, whether it's video cameras that are taking videos of the streets that we live in, or audio recording. So the data is private, we need to secure it, and we need to be aware of it. And the attack surface that we see is that since we have a lot of devices, and each device has a memory and firmware and physical interface, it exponentially increase the exposure. And we have a lot of communication channels. We are integrating to a lot of different networks. So the protocols that are used need to be protected and be secured. And the applications and software that these devices are using and running, they can have and hold a lot of vulnerabilities. Again, the attack surface is coming from I mentioned here three major vectors, but since we are talking about a lot of devices and the network is huge, it really exponentially increase, and you have to face them wisely. As Saverio also said, you have to plan it and revisit it all the time.
Definitely. And on that note, Saverio, too often the focus is technological centric when we talk about IoT. What are some other considerations? Lily brought up sustainability. Do you have anything else to add to that list?
So first of all, there is an important skill / management issue to address, and is twofold. On the adoption side, there is sometimes completely very poor understanding of what an IoT solution is and why I'm going to do the IoT solution. Yes, what the objective of doing it, and therefore there is also, so I'm talking about management level, and then there is the lack of skills internally to an organization. And I'm working with small, medium enterprises, and I see they suffer. They do not have the actual people prepared to do certain things. Therefore, they need to go out and engage with other organizations. And the skills is in IoT, and then if we look at the convergence, IoT, AI, IoT, augmented reality, I didn't mention before we're talking about supply chain, IoT DLT, for example, is very important in the supply chain. is quite complicated issue, forming skills in universities that are able to cover the needs of the enterprises. And this is a challenge that we have as not as a company, if you want, but as an educational system and the economy. Also, I think, and Tal mentioned a bit, we need to look at the ethics of this stuff. We are dealing with data that is very close to us, particularly when we talk about consumer IoT, but not only. You talk about smart home, for example, the smart healthcare again. The electronic patient record, which is a type of data healthcare information that I'm sure our friends for healthcare know are data about us and are data that can be gathered and exchanged in an IoT scenario. So we need to understand the ethics of what we are doing. It's not just invasion of privacy, it's how you use those data. Do you use it in a proper way? Do you misuse it? And we know all the misuse of data that is happening. Another aspect I want also to highlight from an ethical point of view is these technologies are exacerbating this diversity or are solving diversity. Economic diversity, gender diversity. We need to think about this stuff in the debate we are having today. A last point that Lily highlighted is sustainability. Today we are debating about the climate change, COP26 and so on. Which is the role of the IoT into this? Which is the role of emerging digital technologies into this? Is a positive role? There are some negative elements to consider. We deploy all these devices all over the place. This is electronic waste at some point. What do we do with it? So I think that now these variables are entering, in my opinion, should enter into the design and deployment of an IoT solution. We cannot really just think from a revenue perspective. Yeah, we need to think of what we are doing. Yeah, and these are, I think, some consideration that as a community, but generally as adopter of the IoT, and because the IoT is for all the economy, as the economy, we should consider when we talk about the IoT. We should start talking a bit more and taking a bit more action, probably.
Definitely.
I have that passion with you, Saverio. I have that passion with you because it is very important to think about.
The IoT for green can do a lot of things. Environmental monitoring, prevention, water scarcity, leakages, all this stuff. We need to do with that. And as Carlos said, we need someone who invested in it. If you look at the water systems worldwide, it's probably one of the most important deployment we can solve with the IoT, and we are not doing it. I come from a small village in South Italy. We are still dealing with leaks without being able to prevent it with the technology
wildfires.
Or fires, yeah.
Wildfires.
Hi, you had something to add to that.
Yes, I think Saverio actually brought a very good point about skills and how organizations try to deal with it. And I wanted to share my own personal example. My employer recognized the fact that they actually needed a group that focused on IoT devices and applications. And they were willing to hire me from all the way from West Coast, and I was a little bit taken aback myself. And when I started with my current employer, it was just the two of us. That was trying to do something new. And with it, it has its own challenges because you're working in a space where people who don't necessarily understand how things work in your area. So it's important to establish yourself as the expert, to be able to educate other people. You have to explain to internal stakeholders how long it could take to develop such products. Because we are working for an industrial gas manufacturer where the projects there could take a really long time, whereas IoT devices don't necessarily take that long, but they come with their own challenges. As to you can achieve a price target only if you make n number of these things. and it could take a really long time to make that quantity. So I think that's where skill sets and hiring the right person comes into play. It's important to be able to advocate for yourself as well as for your customer, as to how things might go. And when Saverio mentioned about skill sets, I thought I should definitely add something to it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sai. So what are some of those key areas that you mentioned focusing on during product development? What are some key areas that people can focus on in order to avoid problems later downstream?
So when I got started, I actually took a tailor-made approach to my product development, where I was specifically focusing on a particular application that's going to be used in a very specific scenario. And when time came for the next product, it turns out we sort of ended up designing an infrastructure that could be used across the board. So it's important to when it comes to making decisions, it's important to identify if it's possible to use it, reuse it in the future. That can actually accelerate your future product development. And I think over time, we sort of developed this cookie cutter approach to things, where once we have developed the hardware necessary, we didn't go back to the drawing board to actually go and redesign things unless it was very unless it was something very specific and it was definitely needed. In that case, we sort of try to refine things, and the same applies to the to your infrastructure. For our first product, we were learning anew, and it's important to understand, it's like learning to ride a bicycle. So it's your first product. You put something in the customer's hands, you saw what worked and what didn't work. But over time, what we have realized is that to actually narrow down the shortcomings and actually address them along, what this enables is that to actually right now, when we think about a new product development opportunity, it's actually really easy for us to take what we have and to customize it for our customer. It takes some time. I would say, keep at it. As you refine, you should be able to bring things together, with whatever you have in your organization. But it needs some resources and time investment to actually get there.
Thanks, Sai. Lily, how does all this growing IoT transformation impact connectivity? How is it impacting it directly or indirectly?
I mean, I think it's definitely impacting connectivity, because I think we need more infrastructure to support it. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I think you think of it this way. I remember a few years ago, I tried to call my family on New Year's Eve, and guess what everyone's doing? Everyone's trying to call somebody on New Year's Eve to wish them a happy New Year's, have a chat. And well, I couldn't reach them because all the devices, and I'm in New York City with mass population, but mass fiber connectivity too, and I still couldn't reach them. So that's kind of it's that bandwidth that's really needed to support all these devices that is still needed out there. So that's going to impact more IoT. So we're not changing. We're not getting less devices right now. All we're doing is increasing those devices. So that was a few years ago. I think it's getting better, but I think there's more room to grow. And I think it all starts from the dark fiber. We probably need more dark fiber out there to support all the needs of IoT.
So Carlos, why isn't the investment coming? Are IoT-based operations not worth the investment?
No, I think that's not the point. So the IoT-based operations are worth the investment. Usually, if they are well thought and designed, they have high ROIs, and I think the ROI is the metric to look at, not the investment. If you have a good environmental, commercial ROI, we should implement the projects. I think that one thing that I'm totally defend is what Saverio said about the POCs. So first do an implementation to test the use case and only then build an entire network. Okay, but my experience says that typically the IoT projects are more easy to get a higher ROI if they are deployed on a company that has operating expenses, high operating expenses, or if the downtime implies capital losses like manufacturing, for example, or if the asset breakdown is a security risk, for example. On these three examples, if an IoT-based operation that can generate data can have a very, very quick return on investment, because we are talking about the impacts being massive if the things are not doing as they should.
Can I touch on that a little bit? I think you also have to take into consideration the people who make the devices are not also the connectivity providers. So there's really a disconnect between those two parties, where who's creating the device and who's supporting the device. And there's a disconnect on that. One of, an example I see is companies say like Facebook or Microsoft, right? They're starting to create their own fiber pipelines to their facilities to support their data. But again, they're supportive of the data. They're not, and their own products as well, but they're not supporting everyone's IoT products. So there's a disconnect between companies who are manufacturing, creating the capabilities, and then actually delivering it. And a lot of times when you look at the global perspective, governments have taken into consideration that, and they really are making it more like a utility. Think of it as, the power company, or, you have to think of it more like a utility at this point. We have all these devices, we need to get them delivered, but they're not necessarily the same companies.
Thanks, Lily. I'd like to move on, Saverio, before you jump in. I just would like to move on. I give you some time, but I'd like to start our third topic, which is approaches and solutions, so we have enough time for Q&A. And just a reminder to the audience, if you haven't been sending your questions, you can down below. I know there's some of you watching not on the Zoom chat, and I'm really sorry that we're not able to get questions from you. But if you have any, find the Q&A and drop them there. Saverio, go ahead.
I wanted to play a bit how can I say, the good guide on the connectivity side. I just want to say that the IoT, they are very diverse applications, which require very diverse type of data and a very diverse type of data exchange. So if you're in a precision livestock application, which you want to monitor your animals into the field, you need 15 kilobytes to see where it is. So you don't need much. So in that sense, you can use a different type of connectivity. If you talk about using augmented reality for workflow management in an offshore on a manufacturer, you need a different type of connectivity. But I think we should always keep in mind that there are different type of connectivities that they can serve this different type of application. So you can use LP1, low power wide area network, for example, for certain type of very small data exchange. You need 5G, and Lily is right. If we want to do interactive workflow management offshore. Maybe you need a combination of those in different scenarios. So I think the connectivity, the connectivity options are there. There are quite few connectivity options are there, but historically maybe we are a bit more moved towards, let's say, the kind of 3G type of world. Yeah, I'm using a telco side, and now we are moving towards the more high-speed side of it. And I think 5G should be the one that somehow agnostically cover all this, yeah, and enables you this very diverse connectivity in IoT solutions. For example, in 5G, you have massive IoT type of connectivity on one side. If you remember the famous triangle from ITU, you have massive IoT, you have ultra broadband on the top, and you have low latency on the other side. So, in this way, you should cover a bit all the stuff. The investments needs to come, but also the standardization of 5G to cover all this is not completed yet. So maybe we should be a bit more patient. I don't know, Lily, what do you think?
I think there's going to be just a need. I mean, that's what you're saying from the infrastructure bill right now, right? There's been a demand, and honestly, I think what's driven it the most have been the work from home and the learning from home. That's really driving a lot of everyone to wake up and say, hey, this is great that we have all these capabilities, but now we need to be able to actually use them.
Definitely. So moving on to our third topic, Carlos, in the future, what will IoT-based operations look like from your perspective?
On our perspective, what we really think actually it touches another point that we already talked. So I think the panelists are really aligned on this. I think what I think that the future will look like, at least I hope, it's integration. Integration is key for me on all these systems to enable to eliminate those roadblocks that Lily was saying, that someone that does the IoT, someone that deals with connectivity and etc. So integration between systems. Why not using the same IoT for multiple softwares or for multiple purpose? So we don't have the problem that Saverio already highlighted of having like electronic trash, like two or three sensors measuring the same thing for different companies. I don't know. I think integration between the platforms it's key. And we already talked about prediction. So the data that IoT can give us can help us a lot on the prediction from the commercial point of view of, for example, our clients that can predict the behavior and be aware that an asset has to do something, until the prediction of the most impactful topics that Saverio talked about, wildfires and water leakages and so on. I think prediction is something that at least I hope an IoT-based operation will look like.
Tal, talking about solutions, what security approaches can be used to minimize some of the security threats, which we've already touched on?
So what we all say, and we see that cybersecurity in IoT is absolutely vital. And I'm going to name a few approaches that I believe can cover the main threats that we mentioned. First is to use a trusted compute environment to secure the interfacing of an IoT device to the network and from the network to the device. We're talking about the edge computing network and technology that handles the IoT communication. It should be with a trusted compute server that identifies the IoT device and makes sure that the data and application are secured and that they are accessed by the authorized machine or users. Another key hardware that can be used, and it's important to use, it's what we call the hardware security model, HSM in abbreviations, that it will combine with the public key infrastructure and will handle secure distribution of cryptographic keys that the IoT device can use to identify itself and make sure that the communications are encrypted. We want to use strict access control, what we know as a buzzword, but it's not a buzzword, this zero trust methodology. We don't trust anyone. We always ask the device and the user or machine that wants to access the device who they are. They have to authorize themselves again and again. So the privileged access management to be in place. Security gateways. You can use kind of, instead of a trusted environment, you can have a gateway that act like an intermediary between the IoT device and the network that enforces the authentication, gives more processing power, and help the devices themselves to better use the network resources. Updates and patches to solve security issues. We need to update the IoT devices and make the software running on them up to date. So you need to use firmware over the air, so the devices should use them. Device authentication using digital certificates. These are numerous of approaches that should be used and be implemented when we talk about IoT and the security that it should be packaged with.
Touching on that, right, on that point of security, talking about patching, how do you design products for legacy systems? For example, how do you develop products that are part of a fully functional product ecosystem when inherently they're disconnected?
I would say, first of all, it's important to understand why are we designing a new product. If it's fully functional. Here's why. I have come across applications where the technology is sort of outdated, and or the vendor is no longer in existence, and they're not making it. But the product itself is quite successful. So, it's important to make sure that you are designing a product that actually beats those expectations, because we have already set a benchmark, and your stakeholders are going to be very reluctant to actually change, because we already have a functioning product. Why should we design a new one? And at the same time, you shouldn't be compromising on what features are already available. Trust me, this could be something as simple as a small LED on top of the device that just blinks every now and then. People are going to complain if that particular LED is missing. You might have added a very new you might have provided any other means of knowing when there is trouble, but when there is that small blinking LED, people are really going to want that small blinking LED, and they're also going to argue that you cannot. And it's also important to keep the price targets in mind. The existing system costs so much. It's your new product is going to sound appealing only if it's going to cost half as much. It's important to draw your lines there and work your way backwards. And while revising the product, make sure that any technological obsolescence could be easily addressed. You're working especially when it comes to connectivity. If the technology does go obsolete, you're able to find a drop-in replacement for whatever you're installing. And it's not necessary to start from scratch, but a good place to start would be to actually talk to the person that originally designed the legacy system, if possible. They might share some insights, and you don't have to go you revisit the problems that they have already solved for you. So it's important to actually have that conversation to find out what they actually learned going through the process, because you might think that something that exists in the legacy system is not entirely necessary, but you might come out of the conversation with interesting anecdotes that you can end up using and improving upon using your new product.
Thank you, Sai. Lily, how do we see, or how do you see maybe customers backing up the IoT capabilities?
Well, I saw Claude in the chat put in edge computing, and edge computing big when you talk about IoT, right? Because a lot of this compute for all of this IoT products is going to happen at the edge. And as an infrastructure supplier, we're working with our customers to help them back that up at the edge, whether that's connectivity and transferring data to their final destination of a data center, to literally backing up that data at the edge with a UPS product or different types of technologies to back up that information so when systems are down. So edge computing, I think, is a big part of how we're going to see that backup and how we're going to see the compute change and move. So I do think that's a big aspect of the backup process. But there's different ways to back up equipment. But more importantly, I think when we're talking about IoT is we're talking about like, how does it all move? And I think that's a good point that Claude brought up on the edge computing side of it, because all this stuff can't work without the edge computing. And then the final destination of where that data center is, it's holding all that data.
Sai, how do you decide between off-the-shelf solutions versus in-house product development? What are some of the trade-offs that organizations need to consider that we maybe haven't touched upon already?
I would say if it's a safety critical application, just go for an off-the-shelf solution. If it's going to, for example, I don't know, operate in a refinery or something, it's a highly regulated industry, and the people who already developed products know what they're doing. They invested resources into actually developing off-the-shelf products. If it involves anything related to safety, just go and you go ahead and use off the shelf, unless you are entering a new market space and you want to explore that space. But otherwise, my approach has always been, when I come across a problem, I try to identify what products that are already out there, and the only time when I take a custom in-house development approach is when the price targets are critical. It's not exactly possible to use off-the-shelf solutions usually and meet such price targets. So at those times, in-house product development comes into play. But it's also important to consider, what kind of development timeframes are we talking about here? Because if you want to put something in your customer's hands right away, and if it's just one-off, just go for it. Just find something that's already available, and if it can actually fit well into your existing infrastructure, just use it. But if you're designing it around for a particular application, and if you think that this application actually has a business case that's going to scale really well, I think that's the ideal candidate for actually developing an in-house product. For all other cases, just there are so many products and so many things out there today. They are interoperable, and you can use it with relative ease with most IoT infrastructure tools.
Lily, did you want to add something to that? Is that where your mic is off, or?
I think you did a great job of sharing that.
Okay, so I want to ask Saverio, and also I guess I'll ask it to all our panelists. So feel free to respond as well. Let's go into the future. What do we see in terms of? We talk about the use cases. We talk about our imagination, right? What does that imaginary future look like, either as a utopia or a dystopia?
Without going into utopia, dystopia, what I would like to see, I would like to see an IoT that is able to contextualize intelligence. in a sense that there is an application that requires only the monitoring, and probably we will have applications requiring only the monitoring of an asset. There will be other applications who want to do more, who want to do the prediction, as Carlos said, and want to be automated. Now, to do that, I think there needs to be a quite very well refined data strategy from an organizations, understanding where the data is, and edge computing come into the story, the balance between the cloud and the edge, depending on the context, on the applications too. So, and then I would like also to see that this context intelligence is also driven by a correct use of data from a security and an ethical perspective. Because we cannot really sell products, consumer products, that you go and see the code and you see the password of the product anymore. I mean, it's unacceptable. I mean, you cannot really see it. You're still seeing it. So I'm looking for these. I want to see these. I've been in this space for a long time. There are some stuff that is in this way, but there needs to be more spread. In order to do that, let me counter argument a bit what Sai said. Yes, in-house is cool, but in-house is dangerous too, if you do not have the skills for doing it. And because the IoT requires different skills, as we said, maybe not necessarily buy off shelf from someone else, but also creating that ecosystem of partners that you have, that enables you to build that solution. So you can have Sai, you can have Lily, you can have Carlos, because Sai, Lily, and Carlos are doing different parts of it. So I think it is important to see the IoT in a multidisciplinary way, therefore in an ecosystem way. And therefore the need of expertise is fundamental. This is my view. I
think we're just going to see more, because I think, I had a recent panel discussion on this edge topic, and we talked about the fact that people are just going to want more. So you're going to deliver them more IoT products. You're going to deliver them more connectivity, right? And then you're going to want more. So what's after 5G? What's after, intelligent devices? I feel like as consumers, we're going to always want more. So I think sky's the limit when it comes to the future on this topic.
Yeah, maybe it's my age, why I'm becoming old, but we need to go step by step. I understand that we want more because the data tells you that you want more, because you can have more insights from the data, and therefore you want more and more and more. And I'm with you. I'm with you, but I think we should, let's not rush on things.
I want it better and I want it faster, and I think everybody wants. I mean, how many times do we look at our screen and say, why is this not going to my website fast enough?
After 5G, I invite you to see the 6G flagship research at Oulu University in Finland with quantum technology in it, and that is the next step. But we are further down. Okay.
We're already talking about 6G, right?
Yeah, and some cellular providers now, I think in the US, are stopping to support 3G. Let's move to the next segment, which is Q&A. We have about 10 minutes, so let's see what we can get through. Somebody from our audience wrote, "Hi, Sharif, from this side," I think they mean this side of the screen. "I want to know how it's helpful in the telecom sector, and how IoT can impact the future of telecom." You mentioned a few use cases. Maybe someone has some more they can add.
And I say a little bit on the telecom. Coming from the telecom, I should say something. I think we should if we look a bit the history of all these. The first machine-to-machine communication, so the M2M, were primarily telecom driven. Yeah? Not even the MNOs, the mobile network operators, but the so-called mobile virtual network operators. So was very connectivity oriented, and was you understand also why. I mean, there was really just looking at the data and exchange one type of data on one type of connectivity. It was not all the complications. And I think when the IoT came in, other angles are coming in. Lily's angle, Sai angle, Carlos angle, the angle of the embedded systems, the angle of the application development, the angle of the analytics, the security angle. The things become more complicated, and therefore for telecoms they found them a bit lost, in my opinion. At that point, there will be a group of telecoms who have really take the IoT with certain seriousness. Yeah, and in the USA, I think you look at the AT&T and Verizon story is interesting in what they are offering today, also around the 5G, particularly Verizon business. Here in Europe, you see the Vodafone and the Telefonica as a good examples. In Asia, all the Japanese and China Mobile, what they are trying to do, they are trying to get a bit behind the connectivity. So they want to offer you more than connectivity. They want to offer you the IoT platform, the device management, the connectivity management. Some of them are capable of doing it because they have work on, some others a bit less. The future for them is on one way on the 5G, I think. On the other way, and maybe Tal can say something, I can see them building a role in the security side of it, from the connectivity, but also from other aspects of the security. But Telefonica 4 years ago had a unit called Luca, which was a security unit, and it's still there doing stuff. So I think there is but they need to be a bit more courageous, in my opinion, to go behind the connectivity. If they just offer the 5G as a connectivity, they will have a limited role. If they go a bit behind that, as they already try to do some of them, their role will be slightly different, more prominent. This is my view.
Sai, you had something to add to that.
Yeah, I wanted to share, a product developer's perspective when it comes to, telecom providers and connectivity options. When I designed my first product with cellular connectivity, it was an uphill battle to try and understand, whom to pick for connectivity options. Like when we spoke to telecom providers, they did not want to talk to us if we did not have large volume. And those that were willing to provide us actually had a unit cost per device that sort of made sense at the time. But over time, but it did not exactly work for us, but we decided to move forward with it. 4 years down the road, things have evolved so much. It went from coming with the unit cost to they are willing to work with you if you have a somewhat manageable fleet of devices. And from there, today it moved on to, oh, we'll give you free data for X number of years, so long as you use, so long as you just buy our hardware. I was impressed by how things have evolved. And to be honest, 4 years ago, I did not think we'll be at that place. And I'm excited for what's in the in the offering for the future.
Can I say another thing, or I'll talk too much? I can stop. I just want to say, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the mobile network operators, they look at IoT and they looked only at connected cars. And these were very large accounts, Volkswagen, BMW, you make a lot of money just to put the SIM into the car. And that was the focus mainly. So they forgot everything about everything else, the healthcare, all the other scenarios. Obviously, at some point, the other scenarios are covered by others. Mobile virtual network operators worldwide, they have an important role in providing connectivity here. And therefore, I think today, Sai is very happy because the operators is more switched on the real opportunity. At the time, was just one sector, actually one application within one sector. Today, the picture is almost everything for them too, not only them.
Thanks, Saverio. So we're running a bit low on time. I'm going to ask maybe a final question, and this is for Mrs. Yusupova, Lily, aka Lily. How does the Schneider Electric feel about passive data collection? This is from a question in our.
I wanted some more clarity on that. What do they mean by passive? I mean, we feel like data is private. I mean, we focus on, you know, when we have a cloud within Schneider, it's a private cloud. We keep our customer information private and secure. So I think from our perspective, we're a business-to-business type of a customer, and our customer data is private. But we do use that data internally to make our equipment better, our software better, our solutions better for the customer. Hopefully that answered it.
Maybe then we'll expand on it for us. But with that, we're hitting our half-hour mark, and I just wanted to say thank you everyone so much for joining. Thank you everyone who's joining us at home. I know the winter is setting in, and it's getting dark out. We're sleeping in more, but it's going to be, I hope, a nice, comfortable winter. And I hope everyone who's in quarantine right now is staying safe and healthy. Thank you so much to our panelists. I will also add for your vast insights and a really wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed discussing this with you. And these were all really fascinating topics I think are really relevant to what's happening today in this age of transformation that we're experiencing. And I hope to get to host you guys again and discuss it more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Good day. Good evening.
Good day.
One more thing before we finish, which is if you want to, anybody from our audience would like to get in touch with today's panelists, feel free to reach out to them directly. All of today's attendees will be receiving an email in the coming days with the contact information of each of our panelists. So don't be afraid to drop them a line if you have any further questions on today's topics. And if you want to stay up to date on Hub Security's upcoming webinars, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter, and we have a Medium. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.